is a recommend to you from Canine Wizard TV, presented by Team LBK. Welcome to our second episode of our summer series titled Working Like a Dog. In this episode, we're going to be sitting down and talking with Dom Grilli, who is a veterinarian technician for the Special Operations Mult-Purpose Canine program for the United States Army. So, Dom, give me a little bit of background about yourself and when you enlisted and then where you went from there.
Okay, so I joined right after high school. I was first 19 Delta Cavalry Scout. I did it for 4 years. I just really wasn't much of a fan of it. It was fun in some aspects, but I wanted to do something different. Okay. So I talked to my career counselor, and it was either at that point get out or change it up, and I was able to change it up. I reclassed over to this job. I went to Fort Sam Houston in Texas, and I did the AIT training for about 4 or 5 months. After that, I went on to Germany for 2 years. I was able to train with the Germans up there and the police side and get to work with their dogs quite a bit. And then after Germany, I came here, and I've been here for 4 years now.
Can you kind of explain to me how one of the things that I really enjoyed about working with you on the professional side is that you've always been humble and it's kind of challenging for somebody to come in from the conventional side to work in a really diverse, challenging community. So tell me about what it took for you to be selected for this specific job as a special operations veterinary technician for the canine program.
Yep. So basically, for us to be where I am today, we have to put in a packet. The packet is pretty dense, and it could be anything from your PT test to your actual proficiency in this job. You send it up to the higher ups, and they basically interview you, ask you some questions. They get to know you and see what type of person you are, how you do under pressure, whether it be deployment, getting shot at, or just a dog has trauma and you got to fix it. And I was fortunate enough to already have airborne school under my belt, so I've already checked that box, and I was able to get selected, and from there I came here and I credentialed out, and that was it.
So you could probably say, it'd be safe to say that it's pretty competitive to get into this job that you're currently in, correct?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about what your daily job is in regards to being accessible and involved with the multi-purpose canine program, and how your skill set contributes to the overall mission.
Okay. So basically, my daily scope could be anything from to helping clean up the kennels, looking at the dogs, making sure that they're okay. If there's training happening that day, trying to piggyback onto that training and making sure that I have an aid bag readily available with anything that I need, anything from a simple bandage for a torn paw pad to actual trauma like dog got a GSW, gunshot wound, and I got to be able to treat it. And making sure that the people I'm going out with are also trained up to that same standard. And it's all one team, one fight. So, like I said, that's daily scope. I also make sure that one of the caveats that we do with our dogs is making sure that wherever they go to, whether it be OCONUS or training while still stateside but other states, is making sure that we have support from other vet clinics around. So
right.
Coordination, if it's a conventional Air Force vet clinic, and it's all Army. Every installation has Army veterinarians or vet techs, and they have a clinic, depending on what their capabilities are. But I try and do that coordination so we are good at all angles in case anything did happen.
That's awesome, and I've seen you in action several times, and was very impressed with your knowledge and your commitment to really providing the appropriate training for the dogs, for the handlers. So let's talk about what is some of the unique aspects of if you're a clinic vet tech versus what you are doing now. What are some differences?
Okay, so not to go back, but so when I first took the job in AIT, they said there could be 3 different realms that we could go to. An MTO, which is a field unit. You don't really do much of this job. You do more big Army stuff, cleaning details, motor pool Monday. The other 2 aspects are clinic, and then the last one is research. Research is more doing burn ratios and doing studies on different diseases and whatnot. And then obviously the clinic is you're dealing with day-to-day anything from a GOA, government-owned animal, to a personal animal, POA. You could do a health cert, vaccines, and whatnot. This is not within the spectrum that I was ever briefed. They covered it very briefly in the AIT, but I didn't think I would ever get this job, so I was very fortunate in that aspect. But to break up that monogamy of what I do versus the clinic stays within the clinic's ability, and they do anything from health certs, vaccines, just the day-to-day normal clinical stuff. And then for us, we actually go out with the teams. We go out and we network. We train with PJs, the medics, 18 Delta, SF medic, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of our viewers may not know what an 18 Delta is.
Yep. And we basically just spread our knowledge. And every so often, we are fortunate to get a clinic where they want to start doing training like that. And moving forward, we've actually started bringing a tech or 2 to come out to do a training with us. And it could be anything from doing med coverage to at a 0 or qual range to we're doing night stuff and you know we're just there watching everything. Anything from hey, you could be in the bite suit to you're just going to stand back and watch in case anything did happen.
Okay.
So
awesome. So a lot of sit around and wait type situations.
Yes.
But I've always been impressed because you are very rarely the sit around and wait type of guy. You're always like getting involved in some shape or form. Mm-hmm. So tell me about some of the other cross-training functions and skills you've been able to obtain or gain access to while working with some of the ODAs and some of the teams.
So when I was a scout, we very briefly covered room clearing, but in the 18 series realm, it's called CQB.
CQB is
close quarter battle.
Okay.
And basically, it's a lot more advanced than I ever thought.
Right.
I went from putting tape on the ground and pretending that was a room to now you're going in an actual building and you have to understand, okay, if your first guy is going to the left, you're going right or whatnot, understanding the tactics portion, because there's a lot more to it than I ever thought. And being attached with the handlers and such, I'm able to ask them questions and understand it a lot better. So if I am thrown in that position at some point, I have a good grasp on it. I'm not up to their level, but I understand it completely.
So one of the things that I've always found it very useful is it's just not because from the instructional side, from what you do, having access to that type of training, in my opinion, always gives you a better assessment about what that operator is going through mentally and what he's trying to deconflict and prioritize priorities of work and all that stuff. So you being able to put boots on the ground and be involved with that specific training, it really does, wouldn't you say? It really does give you a good frame of reference to what the operator is doing and in a very three-dimensional battle space. One of the things that I was really fortunate to be involved in is watching you do a lot of trauma care for dogs, whether it was the diesel dog or whatever the case may be. And explain to me or give me a little bit of insight in not just for the military canine handler, but actually for law enforcement handlers. What are some of the things that you run into when you're dealing with trauma, like priorities of work and all that stuff that's involved with point of injury care for a dog? Give me some of the things that are typically overlooked from a side of like, hey, I got to get my dog to the vet, or I got to do something here to save its life.
Yep, I see quite a bit. Anything from an enlisted military side to civilian police law enforcement side. It's a lot of the equipment and the knowledge. So the equipment being that most times police departments aren't able to get the Class 8 bandaging materials that we're afforded.
What is Class 8?
Class 8 just bandaging materials.
Okay.
Anything from drugs to bandaging to tourniquets. And when I talk to law enforcement, I say, hey, do you mind if I see your med bag, your aid bag, your first aid kit?
Right.
It's when I see it, it's a typical, very generic Amazon bought anything from a splint to a Band-Aid to a soft T tourniquet, which is approved for humans, but not so much for canines. It's not ideal. And it's like, okay, well, is this like your only primary care? It's like, yeah, that's my primary care. And the vet clinic most times is maybe 30 minutes out, 40 minutes. It's like, that's a rough situation, my friend. But I try really hard to give them what I can, either with drug calculation charts. So I send them on an email saying, hey, this is all the drugs that you can give a dog. All you have to do is push in your dog's weight, and then it adjusts for the dosages. And then we also, I try and send them classes. So anything from like, this is how you split a fracture, right, to applying a tourniquet. The only two approved tourniquets for dogs are called SWAT T, which is like an elastic bandage, right, and the other is called a rag, which is also somewhat like an elastic bandage. So
what you're saying is, if you have a human tourniquet in your canine first aid bag, get rid of it and save it for humans, and get a SWAT T or a rat tourniquet. And you could probably Google rat tourniquets or SWAT Ts online. They're pretty inexpensive, but there is a difference with the conformity of the dog's extremities that does not. A human tourniquet, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
That human tourniquet is not going to work
it's not just because the limb itself, it's too small. And for us, a typical tourniquet can actually grab onto that meat and secure it properly. But with the angle of their body, it just doesn't work.
Well, I'm not going to say, what would you say? If that's all you got, that's what you use.
At the end of the day, if you have a tourniquet, make do with what you got.
Exactly.
Or if you can do some sort of pressure. But if you don't have, if you have just the tourniquet, use it. Stick with what you know. So
right, yeah. Absolutely. So actually, you just got done doing running a lane. A lane is not a training, but an assessment exercise for the recent 2021 Fort Carson Canine Competition. Mm-hmm. So tell me about what your involvement in that was.
So I started with the planning phase. It was me and a handful of people, as you know. We got together and we said, hey, we're going to send this out to different kennels all over the place and see who's interested. And at that point, for my piece of the puzzle, it was a lot of the vet piece. So making sure that we had coverage for personnel, that the personnel were trained up to the high standard that we expect them to be.
Right.
And then also making sure that we had the proper equipment. So the first day was heat injury. We made sure that we had the diesel out, the mannequin, and we basically simulated the vitals to replicate a heat injury patient. That was the one lane, but then the rest of us, there were a handful of us, and 2 people were at the cooling station. We had dunk tanks, we had IV pumps ready to go, and catheter supplies if anything did happen. And then we had 2 roamers that were just walking around at all times with an aid bag, anything with IV fluid inside to an ice pack to just fluids. So that was the first day, and then the last 2 days were more combat oriented, so trauma. And we ended up, for the first day, it was, I believe, an axillary pocket wound with a gunshot wound on the front. So the participant would actually have to go in and identify the injuries. And if they saw the gunshot wound, they might have treated it. But then at that point, you have to still go in your sequence and find the axillary pocket wound. And sometimes you find it, other times you just miss it. And it happens.
Right.
And then the second day, just to break up the monogamy of same injuries, we threw in an amputation just to see how the handlers would deal with that. And needless to say, a lot of them were confused and thrown off.
Right.
And afterwards, I asked a lot of the handlers from other bases, like, hey, did you guys go over this? And it kind of goes back to your question with the clinical techs,
right?
Where clinics, they focus on very generic, and it's not supposed to be negative, but they go over clinical stuff, as in heat injury, intubating a dog, and put in an IV, but then they don't really cover the nitty gritty of trauma.
Right. Trauma on the street, on the battlefield.
Exactly.
Right.
And if the clinics never experience it, the techs have never experienced it,
There's
how
no
are they
thing.
expected to teach handlers who are going to go and see that trauma?
Right.
So, and I asked them, like, hey, like, did the people prior to you getting here, did they teach you? Did they train you? It's like, yeah, we went over a 10-minute class about March. It's like, March is at least a day or two to cover, because it's very in depth. It's not just 10 minutes. So
absolutely, I definitely don't. I know there's a lot of vet techs and veterinarians in the on the DoD side and on the civilian side that really do know a lot about, obviously more than any other handlers know about trauma and different medical procedures, but. I'm not trying to discount that, but I have observed in the last probably like 8 to 10 years a shift in the approach of the tactical application for dogs, and there's a need.
Yes,
there is definitely a need, and I see you like communicating that and really just bringing just kind of networking and bringing that information together so that handlers know, whether it's law enforcement or military or what have you. Talk to me. About the competition, man. I was really, and one of the takeaways from that competition was it wasn't just a competition. It really just was able to show handlers like where their skill sets were flawed, where their proficiency in providing that care was flawed. So that was awesome, and I think a lot of agencies and units went back to their home stations and their post and really just said, hey, I'm really we're lacking in this. So it's all a driving mechanism. So and I was really impressed with that. So there was a lot of takeaways from that week of competition. So actually, you deployed as not a handler, but as a vet tech to support a JTF, or was it No, it wasn't a JTF.
It was Operation Enduring Freedom. It was attached to the SOTA.
That's right. The SOTA. I'm sorry. So I know you really can't get into the meat and bones of that, what you were involved with, but you actually had the opportunity to go out and with an ODA, correct? So that's something that's not typically overlooked, or that doesn't typically occur for somebody in your career field. Typically, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. It's very rare for us to get out there
and to actually go out there on a mission outside the wire with an ODA. So that kind of speaks volumes to your proficiency, your professionalism, and obviously put you where you are now. So what is next for Staff Sergeant Dom Grilli?
So far, I'm looking at my options. I'm at 9 years right now, and I'm shooting for the gold at this point. So my contract takes me to 2024. I'm looking at either Ranger Battalion. I'm training up for it, and I should know by September if I'm at that point. If I'm not, my backup plan is go recruiter and try and get high schoolers to be interested in either this job or other jobs within the Army. And that's about it, really.
Come on, man. You got it. Don't sell yourself short. You got to get into the Ranger bat.
I'm trying. I really am. I really want to go that route, and I want to stay within the community. But at some point in our job, we the higher we go, the less we actually deal with dogs. The more
management,
operations, and management we have to do, and we have to let that young soldier take the reins at some point. Right. And I'm going to shoot for the gold for Rangers, but if it doesn't work out like that, I'm okay going recruiter. Because then at some point, if an opening does happen later down the road, and I'm at the peak where I am able to pass the assessment, I'll take it at this point. But right now, I'm seeing where I'm just a 5 meter target. So
there you go. That's awesome, man. So we're going to close out this episode with just a kind of few unique questions for Dom, Staff Sergeant Dom Grilli. So Dom, tell me about your worst experience in your current job, whether it's just dealing with the dynamics at work, or you don't have to say any names, just anything, just challenging or just like frustrating.
I will say it was while deployed. I was dealing with an FST, field survival team.
Oh, okay, team.
And I basically was get down there just to train them and make sure that if a dog did go down, that they were trained up to a certain level and they knew what to expect. And I asked them like, hey, where did you guys get the training? And can we go over some of to understand where your knowledge is and stuff? And this is anything from a captain all the way down to about a specialist. And because an FST is usually only about 5 to 6 per people. So I talked to them like, hey, do you guys have like a dedicated like medical bag for a canine? It's like, oh yeah, sure. He basically chucked it on the ground. I opened it up. It's an M9 bag, which is the typical aid bag that most standards carry. And there was a big old binder inside of it when you unzipped it, and it was the canine T-TRIC guidelines that we train and we read up on every time there's an update. And it's like, that's not the right answer. That's let me just hold on 1 second. Hold on to the trauma. Let me look to page 13.
Right.
It's one of those things where you shouldn't have to read it. It should already be distilled in you, and that's why it's too easy for us to get over to the PJs, to the FSTs, to medics, and just cross train them real quick, because at the end of the day, if I can cross train them and know a little bit of canine stuff, at some point maybe they can cross train me and do a little bit more human stuff.
Right.
So if anything did happen, if there was no dog patients coming in and there was a human patient, I can flex that way and be another asset to them.
Right. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, everyone. So we're going to close out this episode of Canine Wizard TV of this series titled Working Like a Dog. We want to thank Staff Sergeant Dom Grilli for giving us this opportunity to sit down and chat with us about his experience in the Special Operations community, working as a veterinary technician, supporting the Multi-Purpose Canine program for the United States Army. All right, Dom. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.